The O'Reilly Factor is on tonight.
I hope you would experience the loving presence of Jesus in your lives.
But what about money in Jesus? Is the new pope against capitalism? The American left says yes. You'll hear our take tonight.
Listen, you're being an idiot, and if you are an idiot, I'm going to call you an idiot. And if you don't like it, then stop acting like an idiot.
New polling says presidential race of 16 may be Christie against Hillary. And the governor has some problems with women voters. We'll have a special report. Also tonight, Gutfeld McGurk with the pinheads of the year and their predictions for 14. Caution, you are about to enter the no spin zone. Factor begins right now. Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. The Pope, capitalism, and the far left. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. You may remember that Pope Francis ignited some controversy recently by speaking out against unfettered capitalism and the greed that can follow. To quote the Pope, "The worship of the ancient golden calf returned in a new and ruthless guise in the idolatry of money and the dictatorship of an impersonal economy lacking a truly human purpose. The worldwide crisis affecting finance and the economy lays bare their imbalances and, above all, their lack of real concern for human beings. The Pope is correct in portraying greed and exploitation as wicked. But the far left is distorting his words, trying to co-opt the Pope to impose so-called economic justice, which is really socialism, forcefully taking from the haves and giving to the have-nots. I can tell you with certainty that Pope Francis opposes that form of tyranny as much as the Polish Pope, John Paul, did. Nevertheless, the Democratic Party is getting ready to launch a huge social justice campaign to try and keep power in the USA. The Far Left Nation magazine recently published an article by a guy named Robert Scheer, who's about as left as they come. Scheer writes, quote, "There can be no doubt that equality of opportunity is explicit in the core Christian doctrine, that every infant has a soul as significant as that of any other, and that we all be judged by how well we respect the sanctity of the lives of those born into the most forlorn of circumstance." The key words in that, equality of opportunity. And that is a noble goal that every American should support. A noble goal that will never be reality. That's because the human condition dictates that some people will not do what is necessary to succeed in this world. That is, work hard, be honest, stay sober, and get educated. Some people will not do that. And so their children will suffer deprivation, no matter how much money the government hands out. Jesus, of course, understood that when he said, "The poor we will always have with us." The truth is that the United States provides more opportunity to more people than any other nation that has ever existed. That is why millions of folks all over the world want to come here. And we have done that by developing a free market system. Even poor Americans here have material things that most in the world can only dream of. Yet the left wants to tear down the capitalistic structure that has provided vast opportunity. They want to impose a nanny state that redistributes income. That strategy has failed everywhere it's been tried. But the left doesn't care about the facts. It's all about hating America. Let's let Robert Scheer, the compassionate guy, the booster of Pope Francis, have the last word. Quote, "What Americans stand for is a launching pad for multinational corporations that wantonly exploit the resources and peoples of this planet with abandon. All the while, these modern plunderers are protected by the massive military power of a U.S. government," unquote. To Scheer and the far left, America is a bad place that keeps people down. To those of us who are sane, the USA is a noble country that provides massive opportunity to those who will work for it. And that's the memo. Now for the top story tonight reaction. Joining us from Washington, Raymond Arroyo, managing editor of EWTN News, a Catholic news service. And Jim Wallace, the president of Sojourners, a national Christian group committed to faith and action for social justice. So where am I making my mistakes, Mr. Wallace?
Happy New Year, Bill.
Same to you.
Great place to start the year with a story on Pope Francis. The Pope is calling us not to an ideology. He's calling us to the way of Jesus, as his words that you had him speak to us. He's the vicar of Christ. And as a Catholic and as one who knows the Bible, you know what the Gospel of Matthew 25 says, that how we treat the least of these, the hungry, the naked, the sick, the stranger, those who are locked up in jail, is how we treat Christ himself. This is the core of the gospel. So today, just today, it was released, the Pope had a meeting with all the heads of all the orders, and he called priests around the world to get out of their comfort zones and serve the poor. He says, this is very important to me. We've got to be with those on the margins, or else we'll become abstract ideologists and fundamentalists, which is, he said, a mistake. How do we get with the poor? That's what the Pope is calling us all to, not ideology, but the core of the gospel of Christ.
All right, but the difference here is politics versus theory, okay? Theoretically, every Christian is going to help the poor, all right? In reality, not every Christian does. But my contention, Mr. Arroyo, is that capitalism does the most good for the poor, because it provides opportunity for poor people who will seize it, okay? As I said, some will not. And I don't believe that it is the obligation of a Christian or anybody else, okay, to give their money and resources to people who are self-destructive. Am I wrong, Mr. Arroyo?
Well, the Pope is not asking anybody to do that, Bill. And this is the misreading of this document. This all comes from that exhortation a few weeks ago at the end of November called The Joy of the Gospel. It is a spiritual document where the Pope is calling each of us to actively get engaged, to help those nearest us.
And, okay, but we all agree that's a good thing. But
well,
the
sure,
left, as I said, have co-opted the words of the Pope to try to push a nanny state and to say capitalism is wrong. You've got to break it all down and give. But, Mr. Arroyo, Jesus said to his apostles, you give up everything and follow me. And a rich man walked away. You know that. Yes. So there is an interpretation from some people that Jesus says, hey, it's wrong to be rich. You give it up and you follow me.
Well, here's what the Pope is saying. And in that document, he warns about this welfare mentality, Bill. And for all the coverage we've been hearing about the Pope's a socialist, he's calling us to this or that, he also warns about a welfare mentality that can set in if the government becomes the means of charity. He wants you and I to be the charitable giver.
Right, and
he doesn't want the
goal.
government. He doesn't want the government to be
How do you
the
respond to that, Mr. Wallace, that the Pope is basically saying that individuals should help the poor? And obviously we should if we buy into the Judeo-Christian philosophy. Okay? But he's not saying that the government should impose this vast nanny state.
He's also saying in the joy of the gospel that the wealthy, those who have benefited so much, have a particular responsibility to help and serve the poor and be generous. He's saying
but that's fine. But you don't force them to do it. It's a matter of voluntary, which is what I think Pope Francis is saying. Voluntarily you do it. You don't force them.
But Catholic social teaching talks about the common good and talks about all of us investing in those who are the least of these. And he says about the market, he challenges the trickle-down economy, saying that will necessarily help the poor. What he's saying is that this system of capitalism, when it's devoid of values, it really can degenerate. And he's saying capitalism needs values that it doesn't create virtues outside of itself.
Let's deal with reality, Mr. Wallace. The reason that this country is the wealthiest country, most powerful country, and the most compassionate, gives the most money away, is because of capitalism. And in capitalism, there are abuses, okay? That people get greedy and they do bad things. But if you bust down the capitalistic system, you're not only going to hurt the poor, who are not going to have as many opportunities, but you're going to hurt everybody. How do you reply to that, Mr. Arroyo?
Look, I think Jim would agree. Capitalism has floated an awful lot of boats. If you look at East Asia, if you look at the middle class that's grown in China, in India, that's largely because of capitalism. What all the popes have warned about, Bill, from John Paul to Benedict to this pope, is unregulated capitalism that focuses only on profit without considering the human person and the dignity of that person.
You got to have a moral
responsibility
attached to it. All right, Mr. Wallace, last word.
You've got to humanize the market by focusing on the dignity of the individuals and the common good and stewardship. The Pope said he took St. Francis' name because he's a man who talked about the poor and peace and the creation itself. The poor and vulnerable and peace and the creation are values often missing in places of power like Washington, D.C. And that's why his voice is so important to all of us right now.
All right, gentlemen, thanks very much. And Mr. Wallace has a new book out called On God's Side. Next on the rundown,